Hello, my name is Tori Hawkins, and I am here to give a book review for environmental science with Professor Lovely. Today I will be reviewing The Emerald Planet by David Beerling. It was published by the Oxford University Press in 2007. A little bit of background information about the author. David Beerling is a professor at the University of Sheffield in the UK. He's the Sorby Professor of Natural Sciences and the director of the Leverhulme Center for Climate Change Mitigation. Okay, so the main topics of The Emerald Planet are primarily the role of plants in Earth's ancient history. Earth's atmosphere shaped the plant's evolution, and the plant's evolution shaped the Earth's atmosphere in a feedback loop. Plants are very significant to the biosphere. They can cause climate change, and understanding them is crucial for human survival. As Beerling directly says, this is a quote from page 3, "The key to it all lies in recognizing the urgent need to understand how the environment shapes plants and how plants shape the environment over the immensity of geological time." As Beerling states, his purpose for the book is to introduce readers to what he calls a new science. In this new science, plants are a geological force of nature that have been neglected compared to fossilized rocks and other forms of paleontology. He asserts that plants are a geological force of nature, and they attribute to the Earth's landscape and climate, and they had not been previously considered in geological history. Okay, so to summarize the book, in the introductory chapter, Beerling delineates his new science into 3 loose categories. Those are fossilized plant records that tell the Earth's history, which was previously unrecognized. As Beerling says, fossilized leaves can unlock the ancient atmosphere because they can show us the carbon content or the makeup of their atmosphere when the plants were alive. And additionally, it can show if there were any disruptions to the ozone layer. So for this first category, we have chapters 4 and 5, which are An Ancient Ozone Catastrophe and Global Warming Ushers in Dinosaurs. An Ancient Ozone Catastrophe basically covers our recent human history in discovering what the ozone layer is and the research that has been done leading up to us discovering the hole over Antarctica. Simultaneously, the chapter talks about ancient history with the ozone. Specifically, it lays out all the theories for why and if the ozone layer collapsed 251 million years ago. The takeaway I got was that we can see that there was a collapse due to the mutated spores on plant fossil records. As for Chapter 5, Global Warming Ushers in Dinosaurs, it talks about how plants survived 5 mass extinctions, and it speculates on the theories that exist for how and why biodiversity plummeted from the Triassic to the Jurassic periods. The next category is plants as an agent of climate change. The idea is that the evolution of plants altered the climate of Earth, specifically when plants formed their leaves for the first time. Because they did not initially have leaves, they formed the leaves to create the stomata, which suck in the carbon dioxide, and there was a lot of it in the atmosphere during the Carboniferous and Permian periods. And it was because of this evolution of plants growing their leaves, taking in the carbon dioxide, starting the process of photosynthesis, supposedly is what added all of this oxygen to the atmosphere. Another chapter under this category would be Chapter 3, Oxygen and the Lost World of Giants, which is all about oxygen in the atmosphere. We know today there's 21% oxygen in the atmosphere, but the idea is that that is not fixed. The amount of oxygen has risen and fallen throughout geological time, specifically in the Carboniferous and Permian periods. I was really interested to learn about the gigantism, specifically in insects. As oxygen was added to the atmosphere, it became more dense, and as a result of that, we had giant insects because they needed bigger wings to be able to fly. And to just speed it right along, 2 more chapters in that category, Chapter 7, Paradise Lost, and Chapter 8, Nature's Green Revolution. 7 is all about understanding the world when it was a warm, tropical climate all throughout. This is called the Eocene period, about 50 million years ago. And then the other chapter, Nature's Green Revolution, is all about technology advances and humans becoming able through scientific technology to understand how photosynthesis works, like at the chemical level, and the discovery of carbon-4. Anyways, there's a third category, and that is the documented histories of vegetation and their surprising interactions. This is a very loose category. It's basically scientists coming to understand ecosystems and the biosphere. Chapters 6 and 8 can be considered a part of this category. We already talked about 8, that's Nature's Green Revolution. Chapter 6 is the flourishing forests of Antarctica, which is all about the mystery of the abundant forests. Okay, moving on. So what were the main objectives of this book? To educate readers on new science, to draw attention to the significance of plants in understanding and telling the story of Earth's ancient history, and finally to consider the feedback loop of plants and climate change. Humans need to consider the roles of plants for our own survival. Were these objectives accomplished? This book reminded me of Silent Spring in that it is a synthesis of information. Bierling does conduct studies with his group, but it's not just the studies they have done. It is centuries of scientific theories and debate and information. There's a long citation list with this book, and I think that's really cool because science is changing all the time, and it is relatively new. Compared to the immensity of geological time. So I thought it was very effective to include all of this information from all of these different people and find a way to synthesize it so it reads like a novel. A nonfiction novel, but a novel all the same. I also think Bierling effectively brings all of the scientists' studies and phenomena together. He's able to tell a story of the Earth's changing atmosphere, landscape, and creatures, all while focusing on the role and significance of plants. Finally, I think this book is educationally accessible. It is a collegiate level reading book, definitely a scientific nonfiction. That being said, it does flow very easily. He does a good job introducing these scientists and giving a little bit of background about them and then building on their theories. One criticism of what didn't work so well is Bierling states in the introductory chapter that he is avoiding using heavy-handed, complicated scientific terminology. It's true he doesn't dump a lot of terminology on the reader. However, he does introduce complicated terminology and reference back to it later. So he claims that the book can be read out of order, but I would argue there were some terms that had I not read the book in order, I would have been kind of lost and had to go back and read. So perhaps he's giving his audience a little bit too much credit when he says he's not using complicated terminology. Okay, so what were the major themes? I think change was the most major theme of this book. It was very shocking to learn that plants did not used to have leaves, and that's something that they had to gradually evolve into as the atmosphere shifted. So the plants change, the atmosphere changes. As I said before, the plants in the atmosphere create a feedback loop with each other. Through Earth's history, we've seen dramatic climate change, 5 mass extinction events. The planet has seen ice ages, warm oceans, an atmosphere with low oxygen, an atmosphere with the oxygen 21% that we're used to. All the beings on this planet evolve. Change is a very big theme. Moreover, I think on the theme of change, it's humans' understanding of what the natural world is and how we relate to it, that too changes, and it shows within the book because, I mean, at one point he teaches about Gaia theory and how that develops into the Talom theory, and then, you know, next we have Darwin's, theory of evolution. So our understanding from a scientific lens is changing all the time. We've learned more in the last couple decades than we have in the last couple centuries. Our technology is always advancing. Human understanding is always changing. And as we know, climate change is a real threat to our survival. The planet is changing as we speak, possibly to our detriment. So I think the book really poses this question of, will humans change? We're at a point where we have the foresight to like put all these puzzle pieces together and understand how the atmosphere and climate has changed over time. And it seems like we understand that our actions are destroying what we consider a planet that we can inhabit. Will we be able to change our practices to ensure our survival? And if we change our practices, is it too late to ensure our survival? Who was the intended audience for this book? I would say if you can read at a college level, this book could be for you. People who are new to science could learn a whole lot, like myself. I'm taking botany next semester, so it's not a field I know a lot about, and I learned a lot from this book. But I think people who are well experienced in science also have a lot to gain from this. Bierling does call this idea that fossilized plant records are so significant. He calls it a new science. So somebody who's like very trained in the disciplines of old science, hypothetically, could learn a lot from this book. Anyway, some brief highlights of what the reader learned. It would be very difficult to summarize everything I learned because it was a lot, like every sentence. But my favorite chapter was chapter 2. And again, that's because my mind was blown to learn that plants did not initially have leaves, and that was something that they had to evolve into to like create their process of photosynthesis as the atmosphere changed, and then they changed the atmosphere, and that paved the way for mammals like us. Another interesting thing I learned was the importance of Victorian herbarium archives. It made me think of one of our lectures from Unit 1 where we got to see a picture of Darwin's greenhouse where he conducted his studies. That was very cool. But it turns out these archives were super important for understanding like the recent history of the Earth through plants. For instance, through these archives they were able to see that tree leaves evolved to have fewer stomata to retain water, and this happened specifically during the Industrial Revolution when there was more carbon dioxide being pumped into the atmosphere. It's just so interesting. Did the author change my outlook? Very much so. I feel like I have a much more solid understanding of like what plants are and how they are across the course of time. Did he change my outlook? Very much so, because he gave me a brand new one that I didn't have before. It also very much reinforced to me the imminence of climate change. And it also kind of gave me some comfort, as messed up as this sounds, to learn that, like, well, there's been 5 mass extinction events. Like, the Earth is always cycling in some way. Like, yes, we are here and now in 2020, and it's very scary to think about mass extinction events, but we are very small on the scale of time, and this cycle is more common than we might want to think. I would absolutely recommend this book. In conclusion, after having read this book, I have a much better understanding of the ever-occurring cycling of atmospheric conditions on the planet. As I said, change is the theme. Nothing is stagnant. Just as plants act as CO2 sinks and they provide oxygen to the atmosphere that we depend on to survive, humans are also taking a significant role in changing the climate of the planet. But unlike plants, I worry that humans are playing a detrimental significant role. Plants evolved to survive, and it just so happens that that's a mutually beneficial relationship for us because they pump oxygen that we breathe into the atmosphere. I'm not so sure that humans are evolving in a way that even guarantees our survival. So is that truly evolution? Anyways, despite our technology and our science and our understanding of the planet we reside on, I just fear that we are not evolving toward our own survival. If we cannot change how we are acting on this planet, the planet will certainly change the conditions which act on us. Okay, thank you.